Welcome to the DNA Dojo podcast.
Cool. Hey, hi, hello. Today we're doing the 5 animals of Shaolin, was it? Is that what the technical term for that is? Or is it just the 5 animals of martial arts? I'm not too sure. I'm very new to this concept.
It could be the 5 animals of Shaolin, or it could be 5 animals of Kung Fu. It's just the main animals. Because there's a lot more animals than what we are going to represent today. But the 5 that are the core ones are tiger, dragon, snake, crane, and leopard.
Okay.
So normally you would learn the tiger first. The tiger is more of a strength-based animal, and he's very tenacious and he's very driven. So he's just going to drive forward, and he's going to use his strength against you. Okay. So if you had an opponent that you felt that you were stronger than, then you would definitely want to use a tiger. And they like to rip and tear, use their claws, and they just keep moving forward and driving you back. And also, too, the tiger represents earth energy. That's what that represents. And the techniques are, you supposedly represent building strength in your body.
Interesting. Okay. So I guess that already answers probably the first question I came up with. So they're more of a style that you learn and you change. It's not like, I guess going in, I thought maybe it was more of like a spirit animal type thing where it's like, oh, that specific one is more you, but it's more of a different style that you learn on top of each other. Does that sound more accurate?
Pretty much. It's definitely, each animal has its own strategy, its own strengths. So, and then also too, some people are more natural tigers than others. So definitely, if you have a personality that's very, pushy, just likes to push forward, drive forward, and then you just try to put your will onto somebody, that's very tiger.
Okay. So
does that kind of clear that up for you?
Yeah, I think so. Because the way I was thinking about it is more like, that basically sums up the question that I was thinking in essence. Because it's more of like an action and less of just that person's all that all the time. It's different styles that you can change. Yeah. Okay.
It's different different concepts, different mindsets to put you in a specific mindset of why you would be studying this particular technique over another one.
Okay.
So a tiger also would probably bum rush you because he's just going to keep coming forward. So if you get those type of styled fighters when you're sparring, you're going to have people just coming straight at you and they're not going to stop. So if you're not bigger or stronger than they are, you wouldn't want to go tiger on tiger. Okay? Because the person that's stronger or bigger is going to win in that context.
Makes sense, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of because one of the other things I wrote down was it's always funny when you're watching a martial arts movie and they're like, oh, this is Crouching Tiger, and then they do whatever. So that kind of has like somewhat of weight to it, I suppose, because you don't want to, or it's a counter to a different style type deal. So I guess obviously it's in joking form, usually in movies, but.
Well, they're just trying to emulate some of the mythology that's around the martial arts.
Right.
And something that embodies, the different things that you would encompass in that. So you moving forward, you go to the leopard. Now, the leopard's also a cat, but it does has its own strength, but it's not as strong as a tiger. So a leopard is more on speed. You have fast hands, fast footwork. So you're going to be going off at the ankles, and you're going to be attacking soft targets with the leopard. So you'd be, a lot like attacking the throat, the eyes, joints, things of that nature. So the leopard would work off the angles and around you to take your tools away, use its speed to get in and out.
Okay. Interesting. And then where do we go from there? So I can kind of see it starts to get more refined, it seems like, as we're going through. Is that just the first two? And
Those are just the first two. So if we continue on the comparison, so if you're not as strong as the tiger, or you're not as big as they are, then you would need to use speed to counteract the tiger's tenacity, because he's going to keep driving forward. Well, you don't want to attack a tiger unless you're stronger. You're a stronger tiger. So I think I've given you this analogy before, where two tigers fight in the wild. One dies there, one goes somewhere else and dies, because it's strength on strength. You're not. So think of the leopard. So if you go leopard and tiger, the leopard's using his strength and his quick footwork and his quick hands to off balance the tiger. So it's going to be speed against strength for the leopard.
right.
So,
Okay.
and basically, like I said, you're using angles, you're using different types of footwork to get off the angles. You're kind of like, when you're a leopard, you're kind of like a fighter pilot, because if you're watching these aerial combat things or shows based on that, the jet never just flies straight. The fighter jet never flies straight. It's always moving from side to side, so you can't get a lock on it. So that's
Interesting analogy.
yeah.
Okay.
So then from there, you would go crane. Now, crane also designates a type of body style, because the crane is tall and lengthy. Okay. So if you're a very tall person, you would use your length against other opponents to keep them away from you. And the crane is known for balance. So, and that's also going to use kind of like beak attacks. And it gets a little weird when you start talking about, I'm going to use a crane's beak to attack you. So I don't really want to get into that, but it's about balance. It's about attacking your opponent's balance. So a lot of crane stances have kicks to the legs. So you'd be taking out your opponent's legs, and you would be using your body to look bigger than you are. So that's how the crane works.
Yeah, I think it's probably like there's more takeaway from the essence of the animal than when they get into the like styles of attack specifically from it. Obviously, like a leg kick is something, but yeah, when you're like with the beak stuff and like, oh, I'm gonna stab you, it's like gets a little bit goofy, a little bit into the like, one punch territory type stuff. Not quite that bad, but
yeah, it does get a little bit goofy at that point. But it is giving you ideas and strategy, and I think that sometimes it takes a while for people to realize, like, well, why are we learning this animal? Like, what's significant about that animal? And I don't think that people really, until later on, realize, what to ask about it. Because in Shaolin Kempo, really early on, we have techniques called Kempos. Basically, there are skill builders. Those are things that preview other techniques later on in your development. So it's kind of like a seed that we plant to go, okay, you're going to work on strength here, you're going to work on balance here, you're going to work on this footwork, you're going to work on this hand speed drill, things of that nature.
Okay.
So
that's interesting. I had a question, then it left my brain, so let's just move on. Maybe it'll come back.
Okay. So we've talked about tiger, talked about leopard, we've talked about crane. Then we go to the snake. So the snake doesn't have any arms and legs, of course. The snake is going to be attacking vital targets. It develops more internal energy as well. And we also look at the snake is kind of coming in as smothering you, and it's definitely going to take you down to the ground. And then we always look at our ground technique as being very snake-like. And I think that from a grappling standpoint, probably you might agree that you guys consider yourselves snakes on the ground, wrapping people up.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, though, because the snake's the first one that we talked about that has such a variety within the word snake. Do you have a specific like when you keep when you say wrap people up, I keep thinking like a python boa constrictor style. But and then earlier you said vital, so that made me think of something with fangs, more like a cobra or something like that. Is there a specific snake that they have in mind, or they just say kind of overall snake and people get the gist of it that way?
I'm not sure if they initially look at what type of a snake. I think that if you were talking about maybe the origins of the snake, probably it'd be a cobra.
Okay, yeah, that's what I probably should clarify now that I think about it. Like, I guess the origin of where this stuff came from, perhaps that would be the place to look when they see, oh, we have way more of these snakes than, because like obviously in the U.S. we don't have too many boa constrictors around. We have right. Some corn snakes and some rat snakes and things like that. So you think of more like coiled, like a rattlesnake, for example, coiled up in the grass waiting to attack or something like that. But where this came from, they probably did have more python style breeded snakes, I would assume. So that would make kind of sense.
Yeah. So I mean, basically what you're doing is you're going to wrap them up and then you're going to strike soft targets like the throat and take them down to the ground and just stay on top of them and smother them just like you would, exactly like Brazilian jiu-jitsu or any type of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it does kind of make sense that this snake does that sort of thing, not only in the snake, but when you think of like snakes in the mythological sense of just kind of being like devious and more of like a dirty style fighter where you're just like, all right, in close, really pointed attacks and things like that. It's a little bit more down and dirty, perhaps.
It could be considered that way. And now the last of the ones is the dragon. Now the dragon is a mythical animal. It's not an actual animal. But with the dragon, it represents heaven energy. So if you see depictions of dragons, especially in Chinese mythology, they have that ball, which is a chi ball, which is basically a representation of their knowledge that they've built. And the dragon is considered has all the knowledge of all the 5 animals. The other 4 animals combined with its own knowledge. So the dragon likes, of course, to use whips its tail. So you use some whipping motions that maybe will take somebody down to the ground. It also likes to mirror its opponent because you're using the opponent's knowledge against himself. So a lot of techniques when you do with the dragon, you end up in a mirror stance, like either behind them or to the side or something like that. So it's just the one that has the most knowledge. So it's the one that can pick you apart, then use any style. Could use speed, it could use strength, it could use high-low motions, up and down, in and out, whatever. It uses everything against you.
Interesting. And another question, again, off of limited knowledge that I have, was based on the dragon. Is it a mythological creature because, let me see exactly what I wrote down here. Because I was thinking, is it mythological because technically it's like an unobtainable, and unobtainable is not the right word, but more of like an endless journey to learn everything to get to that dragon state? Is that why you think or is it just because dragons are cool and they're the coolest of the mythological creatures? I don't know.
Well, there's a lot more to that subject as far as the dragon, because if you look at the culture, throughout culture, you have dragons that are implanted not just in the Asian culture, but also in like Western culture as well, medieval time type of thing, and they're supposed to represent, and I don't want to get too far into that subject because it's a different subject.
Sure.
But they're supposedly represent an alien DNA. Somebody might think we're crackpots talking about that, but yeah. But if you do look throughout history, that there's a representation of dragons through a lot of different cultures, and the hierarchy of that. But that's why it's considered heaven energy.
I was going to say, that's interesting because coming from like a more heavy metal background, you usually see the dragon, I guess it's more of a giant serpent, maybe is what I'm thinking. but it's more like associated with like black death metal and that stuff. So it's interesting that it's like a heavenly energy here, but then something it's just I'm probably more thinking of the serpent would make more sense now that I'm actually thinking about it. But that's funny. And then like you said, throughout history they have different representations of dragons kind of all over the place, which they just haven't found them yet, but they are out there. So stay tuned for that one.
So that's a good overview of what the animals are and the strategies that they give you. And of course you can break it down to techniques, which would be more video that you'd have to really do to show the difference between them. But that just gives you a game plan on what the animals can teach you. You could do a lot of research on that. And of course, if there's other animals, there's like eagle and there's rooster,
Sure.
they just keep going. So
I was going to say, because like with doing different martial arts, you kind of go to some seminars and they're like, oh, well, we kind of invented our own martial arts style, and then they demo it. Have you had anyone who's like, oh yeah, like try and convince you that the animal that they're talking about is like good? Have you had some like crazy, like, oh yeah, the Lima toad or something like that? Have you had anyone that's heard of anything ridiculously goofy like that?
Well, first of all, let's talk as far as everything that's been done in martial arts has been done.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, period. If somebody says, oh, I invented this. No, you didn't.
Yeah.
It's derivative of something else that you learn. Okay? So let's just break that out right there. Because you have so many arms, right? So many legs. Your body can only move in so many directions. And what's the three basic things you're going to do in a fight? You're going to punch, you're going to kick, and you're going to grapple. That's it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, unless you find somebody that's got an extra arm or an extra leg, three-legged jeans, no.
Yeah, and then try teaching that to someone else, right? Yeah, it's kind of like I always hear a lot of people say, they're just like, yeah, like ever since William Shakespeare, like nothing new has been written. I was like, I guess that's kind of true. I hear that's in like a lot of literature circles. They're like, yeah, he's written pretty much everything up to that, or like up to that point, everything has been written. So there's nothing new under the sun now. So I guess it's kind of the same type argument.
Well, I think that things get repackaged. So if you look at the history of the Chinese martial arts, so basically, just to break this down, and maybe it's a good topic to add to this. So there was an Indian monk, and his name was Tao Mo, and he came from India to China and to visit the monasteries. So the Shaolin monks at that time were not warrior monks. They were just monks. They fasted, meditated all the time. They were just weak, and they were getting their asses handed to them. People were just robbing from the temple and all that. So there's actually a cave, and I don't remember the name of it. Our school definitely goes to China, and we have a monument at one of the temples, the main temple, and there is a cave there that Tao Mo went into and meditated, and he came out with the Shaolin system.
Interesting.
And he taught the monks the Shaolin system so it would build their body and their mind, and they would be able to defend themselves. And that's the history that was passed to me. Now, that's probably an oversimplified version of what it is.
Sure.
But that's what he did. And, there's a lot of other styles out there, like praying mantis style and, just these weird things.
Yeah.
You see a lot of it, but people observed these animals, insects, these birds, and developed a style from it.
Yeah, I was thinking that earlier. Maybe actually that was the thing. It wasn't a question I was going to say earlier. It was more of a statement. But I do remember, like looking. I forget. I think I was doing some like indigenous tribe style learning or something, and it was interesting to see how you see a lot of like the Indians where they'd put the tiger head on themselves or something like that to blend in. But I mean, we really did. You kind of learn in the hunting aspect of how to hunt based on watching the apex predators at the time. Obviously, we kind of grew out of that a little bit due to technology, but back in the day, I mean, you sat and wait. You had to learn how to be real quiet, creeping up. You didn't have anything that you could shoot from very far away, like a bow and arrow. It gives you 30, 40 yards, but at best, on a good day. So it's interesting to see how in past history that they did learn from these animals that were the apex predators of their time. So it definitely, I could see how it ties into this in a fighting aspect for sure.
Well, the other thing too, and another thing that was shared with us going through learning the system, and I try to dig into the history and the philosophy. So Shaolin Kempo is considered the mother art because even though that martial arts was started in India, and spread to China, that what happened is that the monks spread the art throughout the rest of the Asian world and beyond. So you had monks that went to Japan. So you have Okinawan karate. So karate is a derivative of Shaolin arts. It's more of a straight, linear style, but that's their interpretation of what the Shaolin style was. Now, you also had a monk that went to Korea. Korea has a totally different style. They have a lot of jump kicks, things of that nature. So they adapted that to taking people off a horseback in Korea.
Right. Yeah, I think I remember you saying that, but I was literally just going to say that. Yeah, it's interesting they adapt to like the style that they have too. That's what makes the art part so fun.
Well, yeah, plus you have the difference in China as well, as you have northern and southern styles because the countries are different. In one part of the country, you might have your feet in a rice bog, so you're not going to be using a lot of footwork. Sure. In another part of the country, it's going to be mountainous. It's going to be cold. So you're not going to be using your fists. You're going to be using other parts of your body to fight because if you hit somebody, as you know, living in a cold climate, you hit something in a cold climate, it's going to hurt a lot more.
Oh, yeah. Going up playing football, getting your fingers smashed in face masks in sub-degree weather, that'd wake you up, man.
Oh, for sure. And we used to play, when I was growing up there in Jersey, we used to play well into December because we were always in the playoffs, playing in snow. We would tackle people in the snowbanks, but you hit people and your whole arm just lights up, feels burny. So you're going to use different things. And also, too, there's different, I think also, too, it goes to different hand strikes as well when you study the animals because you either have, a spear, which is more crane. You have a leopard's paw, which is going to soft targets. You have tiger's palm, which is your palm plus your fingers. So you kind of hit with your palm and then you tear with your fingers.
Okay.
Or you're grabbing the throat. Just you're hitting the throat and grabbing and squeezing. Because if a tiger grabbed you by the throat with its mouth, of course, he's going to rip your throat out, right?
Yeah.
So it's similar to that. Snake doesn't have any arms, so what's he going to do? He's got to just kind of tie you up in a knot.
Right. Suffocate you.
Yeah. So and the dragon just uses a lot of different techniques, different hand techniques or different blocks, because it does have hands as opposed to the snake. It has arms. Maybe they're small little T-Rex arms. Maybe they're bigger than that. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you never really... Dragons are so different throughout. Yeah, that is an interesting thing, too. Dragon is kind of always changing throughout mythology. Like, you see... Like, I guess the Chinese dragon does have that kind of shrimpier arm style, but then you see... I guess take Game of Thrones, not having even really watched it, but I've seen the dragon where they just kind of are like these bigger, more colossal destruction things. So it is kind of ever changing, I guess, which is another reason that the dragon is like an interesting collaboration of all the knowledges. It does seem like it changes. Now, whether or not that's just being made up on the spot, I have no idea, but that is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you always have. It also goes back to some other things when you touch upon it like that, because you do have traditional things, but in order to create new art or to further along the art, because it has to evolve, because we learn different things as thinking creatures. We can't be doing the same art that they did, 1,000 years ago. We might do similar things to what they did, but we have different things now. We have different obstacles in our life. We have different people that might attack us. We have different weapons that might attack us. It's all just comes back around.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say when you first said that. I was like, yeah, I mean, they didn't have guns that long ago. So that's even, I mean, you know, even though guns is kind of up that close, it's essentially a moot point a little bit. But yeah, like different knives that come out, you know, people might be wearing different style gloves, or you got to worry about falling off a curb or into a car. Like, yeah, I mean, it does have to always be changing. And I was going to ask you, I was like, how do you feel about when people are like, no, we got to learn it the traditional way and not ever change? I mean, there's definitely a case to be made for, hey, learn the traditional stuff so that you use it as like a base level to grow off of. But I have run into some people where they're like, yeah, like I only do the art that's basically prescribed in this style, and then that's all I do because it's the best. And you're like, well, you don't have any room for growth. Like, what are you doing?
No, it can't be thought of that way. I mean, I've been through quite a few revisions, studying Shaolin Kempo over the years, where you'll learn something, and I have a tie back to like the really early stuff as well, coming through the 70s, 80s, and 90s influences, and then going through the 2000s. There's things that we had to change because maybe they didn't work the way that we wanted them. We put them through a test. You know, we put them through the gauntlet, you know, the Temple of Truth to see, well, is this going to work or not going to work? Or how do we make it work better? How do we make it work 90% of the time? What do we need to do to make it work? So you still need to, you subtract some strikes, you add strikes. We were always told that you can add a strike if it doesn't hinder the technique. You can add things in there. There's hidden strikes in a lot of things that you could use, and if it adds to that technique, great. But a lot of things are meant to be openers, though, too.
Yeah, that's one thing that we kind of did a lot is we didn't strike so much because we didn't, you know, want to just be punching each other in the head. We'd throw in some strikes here and there, but it was very much like we'd start training, you'd go through the whole move, and you'd constantly just have to be thinking like, oh, I could have thrown a strike there, could have thrown a strike there, could have thrown a strike there. Like there's so many more opportunities than you think. You just kind of don't because you're training. But yeah, that's a very good point.
Well, I think that going back to some conversations that you and I have had before, as far as how some arts get so locked in to their own art and go, oh, well, you're not going to hit me. It's like, really? Yeah. I'm not going to hit you? Like, I think you're being a little bit unrealistic because I don't think, no matter how, if you don't deal with strikes, you don't know how to deal with strikes. I mean, instinctively, you're going to keep backing up because he's going to keep driving. So I think so if you look at that, though, too, if you get a guy that's not thinking about strikes and a guy that is a striker and he's going to go tiger, keep coming forward, keep pushing, or maybe the guy does have some other experience. Maybe he came from a boxing world or kickboxing or something, and then he goes into grappling and then at least has a clue. Well, that's fine and good. So maybe if I sense that you have some ability, then I'm going to go more leopard. I'm going to use my speed, my footwork, a lot of hand strikes to just pepper you up until I find that one shot, and then I'll switch back into, you know, the knockout shot.
Yeah. I was thinking, I remember watching a couple videos that's like, oh, so-and-so black belt professor up against like some MMA guy or something like that. And sometimes I do get it where it's like, hey, the MMA guy's going to win surely because he does MMA. He's a professional fighter. He gets punched in the head. Like there's not a lot you can do. That being said, how often are you going to get in a fight where you need to actually defend yourself against an MMA fighter? Probably, well, higher these days, but like a professional guy that is used to just getting beaten senseless, probably pretty low. So some of those videos are like interesting to watch because maybe the guy truly has, maybe it is just some, you know, semi-made up martial art. The guy just proclaims that he's a 10th degree black belt or whatever. But you do got to watch some of those with a grain of salt of being like, yeah, that guy, there's not much you're going to do to stop him from coming forward, period. Like, unless you're going to, that's kind of a force on force type battle when you're going up against some MMA guys in some cases. So they are a little interesting, those videos, but sometimes they're a little bit of I feel like it's just the internet magic type crap.
Wait, if you break that down though, you have a lot of these guys that are martial artists, let's say in quotes,
Yeah.
that they're older. Okay, yes, maybe they're an expert in their art, but they don't spar, so they don't have the timing engaging. Now, MMA guy, what does he do? He spars all the time.
Exactly.
He drills all the time. So yes, he does have an advantage in that part. But also too, if you take a martial art, and we've had this discussion as well, and have it again in a further breakout, is sport against self-defense.
Right. Yeah.
Because if you have a guy that studies an art and you're reacting to somebody that's trying to do you physical harm, self-defense is totally different than being in a fight, because you are not reserving yourself in a self-defense situation. You're going out and attacking targets. You're trying to destroy whatever target that you can get to. You're trying to get away, and you can't gouge the eyes. You can't grab the groin. You can't punch somebody in the throat. You can't hit somebody in the back of the neck. So I mean, and those rules are going to come into that situation. You never see the MMA fighter and the martial arts master, so to speak, which I wouldn't. You're never going to see them on an equal playing ground.
Right.
Because either
yeah.
somebody's going to sacrifice something. It's just like when a striker goes into a grappling school. It's like you're grappling and you're like, man, I just saw like 50 ways I could just light you up.
Yeah.
And then you pull out and somebody pulls a knife, and it's like, now what are you going to do? Because you're grappling. You're going to grapple a man with a knife when he's sewing machine you.
Yeah, that's why I always we probably talked about this before. When someone gives you the like, oh, well, what do you do if this? And I'm like, well, I don't like playing the what if game.
Yeah,
because you could play that all day long. Like it's just kind of an annoying game to play. And sure, you could be like, oh, well, a guy walks up to you in the street and pulls a knife on you. Okay, this is what I would do. But then, like, you just keep playing that what if game. And I think you even saying that, where the guy was like, I don't know if it was you or someone else, I think it was you, where it was like, oh, what do you do if a guy comes up and pulls a knife on you? You go, okay, you do this. And then they said like, oh, well, what if they pull a knife again? Or like they pull another knife. Then you're like, okay. And then you're like, oh, well, what if they, take their shoe off and stuff? It's like, all right, dude, like, at a point we can play this all day long. Like, what if I don't do anything? And it's just such an annoying conversation to have, because it always feels like they're trying to just be like, gotcha. And you're like, well, okay. Like,
yeah, but that's another subject that we have going is about situational awareness, of course. And the first thing is avoidance, totally. And if you can't avoid, then you distract or whatever to get away. I mean, there's a lot of things that lead up before you really need to be in a physical confrontation.
Right.
So
yeah, that's a whole topic for another day.
That is a topic for another day. But I think that kind of sums up. Does it give you more of an idea maybe for you going into a sparring application now? Like, I know it's just kind of a brief overview of animals.
Yeah, no, even just kind of, because I think I do, when I was sparring, it would be a lot of like, man, this doesn't work. All right, let me try it again. And instead of like sitting there and analyzing it, and my friend's really good at doing that. That's why I think he's a phenomenal sparrer, but he's very good at, I don't even know if he does it on purpose. I think he just subconsciously kind of knows what counteracts what, because he's been doing it for so long. But yeah, that's not something I really ever ventured into. It was like, okay, if he's doing this, I should try something different. Like, obviously I'd change up a little bit, but I never really looked at it as a more in this aspect where I could start looking way outside of just, all right, well, maybe I'm just too slow, or maybe I'm just throwing that punch at the wrong time, instead of, nope, he's probably more this style, so let me try something that's more complementary to it. So
you can look at it that way. I think part of it too is just, for myself, I know when I was actively sparring a lot, that I would you go through some pain. You're going to take some lumps when you try new stuff. So you go through that, and you're going to get the crap knocked out of you, and then you start making it successful for yourself. Well, for myself, as soon as that I made it successful, and people would ask me, "Well, what did you do?" I would tell them, and other people would give me crap about it. Like, why would you tell them what you're doing? Because I'm making myself a better fighter. Because now they have to counter what I'm doing. So now I need to go find something else. So you keep upping the arms race, basically.
Yeah, exactly. If you keep it all to yourself and you keep doing the same thing and no one can figure it out, then you're like, well, I guess I don't have to do anything else. But then the one guy that figures it out, you got to keep going until
right. Because you're in a controlled environment. You're respecting your partner in the street. You're not there's no respect there. I mean, you have to take care of what you have to take care of, plain and simple. But if you're with people from weeks, months, years, decades of training, you want them to get better and you want to get better. So you keep pushing their game, they keep pushing yours. And that's a trade-off back and forth. They get better, you get better. And my instructor would always give us he would always give us things that he just learned to challenge himself, because he's like, I want you to be able to challenge me with this material as well. Like, come at me. I get to deal with it just like you have to deal with it.
Right.
So the better you are, the better I am. So that's where we're at.
Cool. Yeah, that's an interesting topic. There was a lot more there than I thought when we first started. I was like, kind of felt like it was getting into a lull for a second. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess it'll be a short and sweet one. But then we're pushing about 45 minutes. So that pretty much wraps that up. I think that was a good little conversation on the animals of, well, just martial arts in general, I think. But
right. If people have questions or they want to add to the discussion, we're more than happy to take emails or contact us, and we can go into more in depth on it. We could probably do a podcast on each specific animal and how to train for the animal and the strategy of that animal. But this is just a good overview. So, hey, man, thanks for taking your time out today, and look forward to the next one.
Of course. Thank you. Same as well.